Details. Jill, good morning.
Good morning. In a hearing held at 3 a.m. Hawaii time, a judge sentenced Casey Anthony to 4 years in prison for lying to investigators. But she could be released from jail in just a few weeks because she's already served nearly 3 years in jail and for good behavior while in custody. Now, today's sentencing comes 2 days after Casey Anthony was acquitted of first-degree murder in the death of her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. Her attorneys argued that she should only be sentenced on one count because the lies Anthony was convicted of all happened in one interview. But the judge concurred with prosecutors who had asked that the 4 counts of lying to law enforcement officials be treated separately. The judge also fined her $1,000 for each count. In today's hearing, the judge explained the seriousness and consequences of Casey Anthony's lies.
Ms. Anthony in count 7 indicated to law enforcement that she had received a call and spoke to Kelly Marie Anthony on July 15, 2008 at approximately 12 p.m., thus causing law enforcement to devote extensive resources.
Now, prosecutors asked the judge for reimbursement for the investigative costs for them and authorities. The mandatory minimums for those are $100 per case for felonies and $50 per case for misdemeanors. But the state is seeking reimbursement for much more than that. It'll be up to a judge to decide how much. Kenny Mahia.
Thanks a lot, Jill. Well, our Facebook page is full of comments about today's sentencing and the original verdict.
All right, so here's what Heather Clark writes. She said that she's guilty and she deserves to rot in there. 1 year is not good enough for a person like her. That's her quote.
Mary Abe posts, only 1 more year in prison. The judge must have given her the max with what he had to work with, not a guilty verdict. And on our KITV.com poll, 38% answered this question. Was Casey Anthony's 4-year sentence just? Again, she's just going to be serving about a year. 38% said yes, it was just. 62% said no, it was not just.
And joining us this morning is local defense attorney Howard Luke to talk more about the Casey Anthony case. First of all, good morning. Thanks for being here with us so early. Mr. Luke, tell us a little bit about what the defense did so well to lead to this.
From what I understand and from what I've seen in the trial, the defense was doing its best to dissemble the prosecution's case. They had a lot of circumstantial evidence, but they didn't have a unifying theme that I think was convincing to the jury. So the defense really had to poke holes and show, yes, this evidence did show that she was a bad mother, someone who was not fit to be a mother, perhaps. But it didn't really add up to resolving all doubts about her guilt. Therefore, as one of the jurors stated from what I've read this morning, while they didn't necessarily believe she was innocent, they didn't believe that the prosecution proved her guilty beyond any reasonable doubt.
Mr. Luke, the jury did find her guilty of lying, though, and these are
Yes.
misdemeanors. So do you think the judge came down hard on her because she will be serving about 1 year in jail for these misdemeanor counts?
Well, I think it's really clear, Mahealani, that this judge was not amused at any point in this trial. Every time I turn on the TV and watch bits of it, he was in stark contrast in my mind to, for example, Judge Ito in the O.J. case, who was very personable, would greet the attorneys, would banter back and forth with Marcia Clark, the lead prosecutor in that case. This judge really kept the hammer down on both attorneys and actually admonished them. I think the 4-year term is indicative of how he felt about this woman. I've seen many, many cases where a defendant is acquitted of a crime and then is sentenced for lying to the judge and really serves a minimal sentence. He really ran it up the flagpole. 4 years consecutive.
I think there are a lot of people who saw this case. It was on TV. They thought, all right, this is a slam dunk case for the prosecution. There was certainly a lot of evidence that they could have pointed to. What did the prosecution fail to do?
Okay, I didn't watch the entire closing argument, but it's pretty clear that what the prosecution did was they had all these pieces of the puzzle and they were put on the table, but they didn't put the mosaic of the case together. In other words, they didn't show how all the pieces fit so that the jury could find beyond any reasonable doubt that this woman was guilty. Now, I can't fault the prosecution because there was no direct evidence, and it was called a dry
The
bones
cause
case.
of death was uncertain. Right?
Exactly, the cause of death. But there was a lot of evidence that would seem to contradict that the defense argument that this was an accident. I didn't see it as an accident at all.
And, you know, I know it's your job to look at the evidence. There was that duct tape, there was a smell of death, but in your gut feeling, when you look at this trial, do you think that Casey Anthony killed her daughter, Kaylee?
Oh, I do. On the other hand, if I sat as a juror in this trial in Orlando, Florida, for a couple of months, I may have come up with the same verdict as a jury. But from what I understand, from what I've seen, the evidence is pretty compelling that she is, in fact, guilty.
Well, Mr. Luke, thanks for joining us here this morning. Certainly a compelling case and a trial that we saw
It certainly
for
was.
Casey Anthony. Thank you for joining us.